This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant and Pest Geek Podcast for the Living the Wildlife podcast. Always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and/or other control methods to manage pests. Wildlife Control Consultant, LLC, Pest Geek Podcast, Living the Wildlife Podcast, Stephen Vantassel, or their or his affiliates are not responsible for followers' use of the information provided here.
Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. Hey, welcome aboard, glad to have you with us. Hope you had a great week. We normally publish here on every Friday, so I hope your week has been great and that you're looking forward to the weekend with family and friends, or perhaps you're doing some overtime and you're going to be earning some more money. You can now tell with my voice here, I'm obviously a little hoarse. I was at a conference recently and I probably picked up COVID somewhere along the trip. I don't know what the incubation period is for COVID, but when I got back to the house and I was feeling bad, and I figured, well, I better check myself, and sure enough, tested positive for COVID. So it was definitely an experience. It's been a long time since I've had a flu-like disease, and this one packed a little bit of a punch. So definitely something I didn't think that I would have to encounter, but I guess with certain variants of COVID, it's quite transmissible, but thankfully it certainly wasn't life-threatening for me. And so definitely something keep an eye out for. It packs a wallop, and I can't wait to get my taste for food back. So COVID, the reports you hear that people can't taste their food. I don't have a great taste palate anyways, but certainly this has knocked that down a little bit, so I'm hoping to get my taste for food back here soon. But nevertheless, I am feeling better, but still a little hoarse. And as I get my full recovery here, hopefully this week. I wanted to talk, before we get any further, a few housekeeping issues involved. Number one, do subscribe to the channel, do ring the bell. We'd love to have you join us on Facebook for our Pest Geek podcast family. You can join us there, join the revolution, as Franklin calls it, where you can participate with us on Facebook and discuss issues related to pest control and concerns that you have with various topics there. Again, my specialty is vertebrate pest control, so definitely love to have you join us along those lines as well. If you have topics of interest that you would have, I tend not to repeat topics, although occasionally I will revisit some. I've done this, been going on for over 4 years now, so definitely you can check through the archives. Chances are I've talked about many of the major issues, but so now I'm starting to get a little bit more geeky and get down into some more subtleties within the industry. You can certainly get those either at my website at wildlifecontrolconsultant.com or go to the Pest Geek podcast or try YouTube or Rumble. Our material is posted up there as well. I would love to get your feedback on topics that I haven't covered. Perhaps there's something you want to discuss. Perhaps there's a new product or service or invention that you'd love me to interview the inventor or the supplier of that. Definitely let me know. I'd love to reach out to them because I love spotlighting new products for our industry. These are exciting times to be part of the vertebrate pest control world indeed, because you're an inventive bunch out there, and some interesting products have been getting developed in recent years as this industry continues to evolve in a positive way, in my opinion. Some of the developments have truly been remarkable for an industry that doesn't change as fast as the tech industry would be. It's just still been a revolutionary experience to see how inventive people have become in developing new products and services for this important field of wildlife control. If you'd like to reach me, you can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about my topic for today, which is, if I pull it up here, do you belong to an association or a club? Now, obviously not everyone in wildlife control work are joiners, right? Some of you are just so independent you don't want to join anything, right? Because maybe you don't like people and you only like certain people. You don't want to be joining of anything. I certainly would disagree with that attitude. We need to be more united as an industry in order to get certain things done. You can listen to my other podcasts about the need for the industry to lobby government more effectively. That's not the subject of this particular topic, though. Today, I want to talk about what the health or quality of the associations you belong to, whether it be in wildlife control, whether it be in your Kiwanis group, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter what associate. This can be rather generic, but these are valuable ways to think, because not all associations are healthy. And again, some of you don't like to join. What was the quote? Any organization that would accept me is not worthy of my joining. So I hope that's not your attitude, but nevertheless, there's some people definitely have those attitudes, but there is a need for us. There's value in joining associations if we didn't, because often our voice is bigger collectively than it is as a single individual. Whatever your reason is for joining or not joining, I'm a joiner, and so I belong to a variety of associations, and so I think it's important to understand whether you belong to an association or a club. So let's talk about this a little bit more. An association versus a club. Now, I'm using the word club in a disparaging, sort of negative way. It's where you have a few individuals or a minority within the association who dominate or substantially control the direction of the organization. Now, you may say, well, every association has leadership, and obviously they're going to have some control. Yes, that's not what I'm referring to, however. That would be a legitimate use of power. The difference is that the group is able to do things where there's going to be what's called an in-group versus an out-group. In other words, if you are popular within the association, then you get the full benefits of the association. If you are not popular within the in-group of the association, then you are outcast. Oh, you may still be a member, they'll still accept your money, but you are not going to have the privileges and access that's granted to other people. That's one of the clues that can help you determine whether you belong to an association or whether you belong to a club. In my belief, okay, you can disagree with this if you want, but my belief is that a healthy association treats the jerks in the association with the same justice as they do those who are not jerks. Now, that's hard. It's hard to treat people fairly who don't treat you fairly. Okay, that takes a high level of maturity. Like some of you know, I work for state government, right? So this is not a state government podcast. This is all completely me, okay? I'm not speaking here on behalf of the agency that I belong to. But my point is when you're a state worker, I have to treat people who are asking for my assistance with the same diligence, even when I don't like them. So I've had situations where people have treated me poorly, and I still need to do my job. You have to bite your tongue, grin and bear it. Doesn't mean that you have to handle abuse. And I'm not referring to abusiveness here. So obviously, if you're abusive to people, then that changes the whole game. If someone's swearing at you or something, no one should have to put up with that. And I haven't had to put up with that. But there are people who are just simply rude and they accuse you of things that you weren't even involved in. I was accused once of someone accused me. It went over my head to my boss and suggested that I was somehow an animal rights activist. I mean, my boss actually laughed when she heard it. So this is the kind of, sometimes people can get a little snippy and they think they can manipulate government in different ways. But nevertheless, despite that, I still need to treat people who make these accusations and went over my head, tried to get me in trouble. I still have to treat them appropriately. The same thing needs to occur in an association. But if it doesn't, then you're really belonging to a club. Because if you're not on the in group, that means you're on the out group. And the rules are different for people on the out group versus the in group. Think of it like this. You treat your family members different than you treat your non-family members. At least I hope you do, right? You should, okay? Your family is your family. Non-family members are non-family members. But in an association, everyone who's a member of the association should be part of the family, and they should all be treated with the same level of respect and dignity, in that whatever the process is for how decisions are made, those processes should be objective and based on the facts, not, well, I think he's a jerk, or I don't like him, or he pissed me off. That's not the way an association should be run. If it is run that way, then it really becomes a club, right? So that's what we mean by justice there. People need to be treated with appropriate fairness and in accordance with policies and procedures in the organization. An association has high transparency. By that we mean that how decisions are being made regarding jobs or opportunities, that there is a clear path or a clear process by how those jobs or opportunities are handed out to others. Where in the club, there's low transparency. You just hear sometimes decisions being made without understanding, well, why was it made that way? For example, if a job becomes available within an association, was the job announced for a call for proposals or job applications, or was the position just simply filled? Now, we're dealing here not with the issue of legality versus illegality. That's a separate question. We're dealing here with what the level of transparency is. Are the decisions being made clear in a sense to show that there hasn't been undue favoritism to insiders versus outsiders? And if you don't see that transparency, then you probably belong to a club. Okay? The next element would be, are the policies clear? Are there clear policies, and are the policies being followed? So, for example, if your organization has, let's say, a standard for how does someone become, I don't know, we'll call it a representative in the organization. Maybe you're involved in an election process or something. How does someone become selected for a particular position? Is it an open vote? Is it by region? Is there any doubt that there's any voting shenanigans? Now, chances are there won't be, right? That's a pretty transparent. But there are different ways that it's done. Is there a third-party counter of the ballots, for instance? Not every association does that. Now, for small associations, it may not be cost effective to do that. They may not be able to afford it. That doesn't necessarily make them a non-association and convert them into a club. But what it does mean is that, well, that's just something you have to be extra careful about, that how are those votes being counted, right? How are those decisions being made? Because obviously if you have a small association of 20 people, for example, if you're dealing with a wildlife control association in a small state, it's going to be hard to do some of these things because you just don't have the critical mass necessary to put in some of these policies, right? So you have to take some of this with balance. There's a growth process to some of these association issues, all right? So don't overpress this. I'm trying to give you some major issues when you're dealing with your association continues to mature? Are you maturing in a good way? Or are you maintaining club-like status as you're beginning to mature? An association will have more votes about major critical decisions than a club. A club will want to maintain, more control and power. And that's where they'll have fewer votes because they'll just simply make the decisions by fiat. There's high accountability in associations. That is, when you have someone elected to a position of an office position, that there's accountability, that there's reports that are being made, and that there's certain obligations. There's a portfolio of their tasks that they're responsible for, and that those reports are publicly available to members within the association without a big deal. Where in a club, there's minimal accountability, where some people are just simply there filling a slot, and they're not being opposed because they go along to get along, and they haven't rocked the boat. A true association, by that I meant an association that's healthy, they welcome questions about decisions and policies that are being created within the organization, because they know that the more people understand how a decision is made and the rationale, that there's greater buy-in. Where with a club, they will criticize the questioner because it will threaten the decision-making process because it wasn't transparent, and may be interpreted as being self-serving, which would then make things look bad. So you say, well, Stephen, boy, this is kind of negative. I really don't want to be judging my association this way. I don't want to be looking at that. And that's perfectly your decision. My point is that not that you can't derive value from an association that has club-like qualities to it. You can, because if your values align with those who are the insiders of the club, then even if you're not actively involved in that association, you're still going to generate the benefits. Because remember, you're going to be getting advocacy from your club. You are going to be getting training from your club, right? The club has to be doing something valuable in order for it to continue to maintain its existence. My point here is that everything's great until your interests clash with those on the insiders of the club. If your interests clash with theirs, and there will be clashes, one of my favorite phrases, everything's great until it's not. And so once those interests begin to clash, is there a process by which those debates can be worked through? And if there is, then is that process transparent? Conflicts always arise in associations. It's just the nature of the beast. How those conflicts are managed is an important part of how we process through conflict, because sometimes when there is no conflict, then there's no one really cares, and that there's no opportunity for growth, because conflict is often caused by growth, and where someone's interest doesn't feel that they're being served properly. In a good association, a healthy association, is concerned about those members of their group who don't feel fully enfranchised, that they don't feel that their voice is being heard. And again, the idea of being heard is not necessarily that what you want gets done, but that you have been given a clear hearing and perhaps an explanation as to why what you want can or cannot be done. Sometimes it's a matter of resources, and sometimes it's just a matter of timing. Then not that your idea is even being rejected, but the association sometimes can only handle so many different issues at once. But you want to be looking at things that are consistent. In other words, have decisions been made in a consistent manner? Or have you seen flip-flops that tend to be only serving the interests of those on the insider group? So look at your association. Ask yourself, well, Did you know anyone who was an insider and now they're not an insider? Or someone who was an outsider and now they're an insider? And do you see a difference with how things are being run? Do you see an opportunity for yourself to be part of the leadership of the organization? Is that path clear, and is it potentially attainable? If you feel that it's not clear or that it's not attainable, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Is that because there's something structural in the organization that prevents that? Or is that simply because you're a poor candidate? Those are difficult questions to ask, but you need to be thinking about it and asking yourself, how are you going to help make your association healthy? Because remember, if you're one of those insiders, you may not want it to be changing from a club because you have a tremendous amount of control and power within that particular group. It's very difficult for people in power to share power and to follow policies because there's a tendency to simply shave corners. He's a friend of mine, I'm going to do something good for him. He wants something done, I'm going to help him out. Because the relationship is more important to them than the policy. That's how you can tell whether you're in a club or whether you're in an association. A club, relationships are more important than the policy. In an association, the policy is more important than the relationship. Which one do you belong to? And which one are you a part of? And are you a part of making things better in your association, or are you working to make things worse or stagnant in your association? Something for you definitely to think about. Kind of heavy stuff today. Well, I'm Stephen Vantassel. You've been listening to Living the Wildlife. Again, do take a few moments, subscribe to the channel, join us on Facebook at the Pest Geek Podcast group. We'd love to have you join us. Love to get your feedback. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. And don't forget that I am looking for individuals who have house mouse scat, roof rat scat, and Norway rat scat. I'd love to purchase that, as well as I'm looking for photos of house mouse, roof rat, and Norway rat damage. You can definitely reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. I'm looking to purchase the use rights of various photos, and I can give you more details by you contacting me there. So would definitely love to hear from you. You've been listening to Living the Wildlife. Why? Because we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. Take care, everybody.